Hey, how you doing, folks? And today, I've got a little bit different video for you, because if you're one of the 6 followers of your channel, you'll know that I mainly make videos about backpacks, outdoor gear, and outdoor backpacking activities. But today, I'm going to make a video about the Indiana State Seal. Yes, okay, because the State Seal of Indiana is a piece of Indiana symbology that has always interested me, because when you look at the thing, you wonder what the heck is going on in the State Seal and what all of it means and how it relates to Indiana. What I'm talking about is this beauty right here, okay? The Indiana State Seal. And you look at it, you've got like a buffalo, you've got like mountains in the background, you got this guy chopping down a tree, and you just look at it and you're like, what is going on here? And what does this all mean and how does it relate to Indiana? And that's what I'm going to discuss here. I'm going to go into what these things mean, what the official interpretations are, and then I'm going to give you some of my opinions about it, kind of what I think's going on, and maybe a couple things that maybe could change to really clear up these debated meanings. Before I get into that, I want to show you this awesome running singlet I have here. Yeah, isn't it great? It's like a play on the Indiana State Seal. And this is created by DINO, stands for Do Indiana Outdoors. They put on a bunch of outdoor activities, running, mountain biking, some other things. And they took the State Seal, slapped a couple runners on it, this guy with a checkered flag, you know, and this thing's great. When I saw it, I can't remember if I bought it or I won it, but when I saw it, I knew I had to have this singlet. Yeah, and I got it because it's great. All right, so there's a free plug for DINO. But without further ado, let's get in to the Indiana State Seal. What I'm going to do in the second part is really dive into the elements and some of the unofficial interpretive meanings of these elements of the State Seal. And just get to the meat of this video, the meat of the State Seal. Let's start from the outside in. On the exterior, you see this solid gold circle going around the edge, and then you have a dotted inner circle, and you've got this wording, the year Indiana became a state, these little symbols over here in the lower left and right. And the reason these are included is they are official elements of the State Seal according to the statute that dictates what must be in the State Seal. If you amble over to the Indiana Historical Bureau website, it has a nice summary of the elements of the State Seal and the state statute governing that, with a little bit of background information on the seal of the state of Indiana. And they also have another page which has a more detailed history of the State Seal of Indiana. It has information about the origins of the State Seal, some of the different versions over the years, some of the attempts to make official versions of the state, make an official version of the State Seal. And then it gets into some of the meanings and interpretations of the State Seal and the controversy surrounding those, such as, is the sun behind the hills? Is it setting or rising? You know, that's still a matter of discussion. Some say it's rising, setting, and I'm going to get into that later on in the video. Let's get back to the State Seal. And the exterior, there really isn't much to discuss. There really isn't a deeper meaning, except these little symbols here. You've got this cluster of symbols, and on the edge of it, these are actually leaves of the tulip tree. And as you might know, the tulip poplar tree is the official state tree of Indiana, which might be a surprise to some people because the sycamore tree plays a pretty prominent role in Indiana history, lore, and symbology. You go over to the Indiana State Song, On the Banks of the Wabash Far Away. It mentions the sycamore tree. Another prominent Indiana song, Back Home Again, Indiana, sung at the Indianapolis 500 every year, mentions the sycamore tree. You've got the Indiana State University Sycamores, university mascot. And then even in the State Seal of Indiana, this guy over here, what he's chopping down, and these are supposed to be sycamore trees, according to that state statute, which determines the official elements of the State Seal. So the sycamore trees play a pretty prominent role, but the actual official tree is the tulip tree. And the tulip tree, it is a nice tree. It does produce some pretty solid wood. And those flowers, when they're blooming in the springtime, you know, they can get pretty nice, especially if you get some of the yellow or white flowers Seeing those bloom on the trees? Yeah, that's a good-looking tree. But moving on into the interior, the meat of this seal, this is where the good stuff's going on. And really what drums up a lot of the the discussion and controversy of the state seal. The first thing you might notice is this buffalo jumping over the log in the foreground. And it's just like, why is this buffalo here and what is it doing? Okay? But if you're familiar with the natural history of Indiana at all, it's pretty understandable why this scene depicting early Indiana might include a buffalo. Because buffalo are actually a native species of Indiana. They would roam in the western tallgrass prairie of Indiana, which was actually the eastern extent of the prairie that stretched across the middle part of this continent. And then they would travel across Indiana on something known as the Buffalo Trace Trail, which went all the way from Vincennes down to Louisville and into Kentucky. This thing was substantial. The buffalo would follow this. There were some nice salt licks they were really after in Kentucky, and they would make this trip on a regular basis in such numbers that the Buffalo Trace would be 20 feet wide in spots, and it would be well trodden, and it would be a clearing in the trees that the buffalo formed based on their own movements. And some of the indigenous peoples would follow this, and the early settlers would follow this. So they would cross the Ohio River near the falls of the Ohio State Park, where the geology allowed for low river levels to allow animals to cross, including the buffalo. So this Buffalo Trace was something else, and that's a part of Indiana's natural history. So it's understandable why this buffalo might be included. Now, why is it like jumping over this log and seeming to flee out of the picture? One of the interpretations behind that is because the early settlers of Indiana came in and they wanted to clear out all the wild beasts and the animals and make it more suitable for settlement. And that is exactly what the early settlers did. The buffalo were killed or they were chased out of the state of Indiana. And this buffalo fleeing the picture, presumably to the plains to the west, is somewhat of an accurate interpretation of history. Now, moving over to the other prominent element of the foreground, you have this guy chopping down this sycamore tree, as I mentioned. Some people think this is Abe Lincoln chopping down the sycamore tree, and no, it's just some random early pioneer settler guy chopping down this tree and clearing the way for pioneer settlements. And one of these interpretations is that they are taming the wilderness to create early pioneer settlements and build a civilization here in Indiana. That's sort of an unofficial interpretation, but it's pretty obvious that it's supposed to depict a pioneer chopping down a tree to settle the land. So basically, your foreground, the general unofficial interpretation of this foreground is we're taming the wilderness, chasing out the animals to create early pioneer settlements and build a civilization. Now, if you look at this as a whole, you notice that there aren't a lot of trees in this landscape. It's a pretty cleared landscape, which is somewhat accurate with Indiana today, but early Indiana, before there was widespread settlement by the white settlers, it was 85 to 90% forested by some estimates. And that's pretty substantial compared to what happened and what it is now. When settlement increased and we chopped down those trees, there are some estimates that in early 20th century, Indiana was only 7% forested. So it went from 85 to 90% down to 7%. That's a pretty substantial and drastic reduction in forest cover. Luckily, we've recovered through intentional efforts and some natural regrowth to be, I think we're up to nearly 25% forested these days. And it's not the same contiguous forest that we had back in the day, but it's a nice comeback from what it was at the early part of the 20th century. Now, moving on to the background, and speaking of trees, you have these two trees in the background, and those are official elements included in that Indiana state statute. The species of the tree is not specified. They're just supposed to be included in that region of the seal. And now we have probably the most controversial part of the state seal, the sun behind the hills. And if you go and read the statute, the official interpretation of this sun is that it is supposed to be setting behind those hills. And what that's supposed to symbolize, okay, it's setting in the west. Indiana was the western reaches of the United States. During Northwest Territory and early Indiana statehood, this was the western reaches of the settled United States. So the sun is symbolizing our western frontier that Indiana used to be. And maybe you could interpret those hills as being the hills of southern Indiana, because some of the early settlements are such as Cordon and the towns around Louisville. Those are to the east of the hilly parts of Indiana. So if they're looking out towards the west, they might see a setting western sun. So that's one of the possible interpretations of making the sun a setting sun to the west. But there also seems to be some historical documentation that the sun meant to be rising in the east. And those hills or mountains are meant to be the Allegheny Mountains in western Pennsylvania and Kentucky and West Virginia. And the sun is rising in the east, and Indiana is the extent of the United States beyond that eastern mountain range, and it's sort of the frontier imagery. And we are rising a new civilization rising and building a new civilization out on the western frontier. That is one interpretation that's out there. There was actually a bill introduced 2004-2005 by a state representative named Luke Messer who tried to change that official language to a rising sun. But that was unsuccessful. So the official Indiana state seal statutory language still says that it is a setting sun to the west. So that is a bit of controversy between that sun. Is it setting? Is it rising? Is it in the east or the west? Maybe you could just take your artistic interpretation to it. Okay, that's my discussion of some of the elements of the Indiana State Seal and sort of the unofficial interpretations of what it all means. I don't think there is any official meanings of it, but those are just some ideas I've run across when I was researching for this video. Hello again. And what I wanted to discuss quickly was just some of the history and timeline behind the state seal and my personal interpretations of it from a modern perspective, and also a couple elements that I recommend we change, to really clear up some of the controversy surrounding the elements of the state seal. So the first thing is that to really understand the state seal and why it is the way it is you have to understand how long it's been around in a similar form. And the Indiana state seal really has been around with some of the similar elements like the woodsman and the buffalo and the hills with the sun in the background for almost a couple hundred years. There's early state documents. The first couple Indiana state constitutions had similar elements in the seal on these documents. So the symbology really harkens back to the Northwest Territory, early statehood, early pioneer days of Indiana. And that's why it's included as opposed to something that might seem more relevant to modern times or what people might think of with Indiana. And similar versions of the seal with similar elements bounced around for a really long time until that 1963 law created an official elements of the state seal and design and put it into state statute. When that law was created, I highly doubt that there was much thought or analysis put into what exactly we're going to include in the meaning behind these symbols. They were just sort of there for so long. And, even though buffalo was not relevant to Indiana in 1963, a lumberjack woodsman wasn't really on the pioneer, on the westward frontier. That's not really relevant to Indiana when this became official state law. It was just longtime parts of the state seal, and probably why it got adopted into the official state seal in the law. So, considering how old these elements are, when you look at it from a modern perspective, I look at it and I'll be honest, I have a really 19th century Manifest Destiny vibe is what I get from it. We're going to cut down all the trees, clear out the wilderness, chase away all the animals, and although it's not in here, we're going to basically remove all the indigenous peoples and move them west or force them to move west if they don't do it on their own. And that's sort of kind of the vibe I get from this when I look at it from a modern day's perspective. And, that's some of the ugly history of Indiana in the United States is we just had that manifest destiny attitude. We're moving westward, and anything in our way, you better get out of the way because we're going to clear it out and, create settlements in what we call civilization for the white settlers, for the European settlers. So that's, when I look at it, I'm kind of like, somewhat problematic manifest destiny thing going on. But, in the history of Indiana, these elements are, as I've discussed, they're sort of relevant to Indiana's history. The last thing I wanted to touch upon was that there's a couple things I suggest we change, to really clear some up. And the first thing is the guy cutting down the sycamore tree, okay? When you cut down a tree, you're supposed to have a back cut first and then do the face cut, and that back cut helps the tree fall in a certain direction. This tree does not have a back cut, okay? And that's potentially dangerous. So I think what we need to do is we need to get in there, change the state law, and require the state seal to have a back cut to really show the proper tree cutting method. Because this tree, the way this guy's standing, it seems like this sycamore tree might just fall on top of him, So let's get there. Let's add a back cut to the state statute description of the state seal. The other thing, quick change. Okay, the hills and the sun. I discussed the whole controversy. Is it in the east, rising? Is it in the west, setting? What are these hills doing? Because there's no hills in east or west Indiana. What we need to do is we need to change the sun as to being a low-set southern sun during the Indiana winter behind the southern Indiana hills. That's right. Not the east, not the west, none of this rising, setting stuff. It is a low-set winter sun in southern Indiana. And that also is somewhat connected to Indiana history because Indiana Statehood Day is December 11th. All right? And so you've got a low-set winter sun symbolizing Indiana statehood on December 11th, 1816. So, that's just my couple quick suggestions of how to clear up some of the issues in this state seal. All right. Thanks for watching, everyone. I just want to do a quick video on Indiana State Seal. I don't know if I see myself making more Indiana history related or Indiana symbol related videos. I just had this on my mind and wanted to get it out. I would expect more backpack and outdoor related videos in the future. But thanks for watching. It's just a bit of diversion, fun diversion for me. You can like, subscribe, comment, do all that stuff. I don't know. Whatever. Stay safe. Have a nice day. I'll see you later.